Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is about 9:30 on a Wednesday morning, so I hope everyone's doing good. I have been knee deep in the world of Game of Thrones, and I've been really loving it. It's been awesome, pretty spectacular. I just started season 4 last night, so I've been watching that. I've been going at it pretty hard, and it's awesome. And I've been totally digging it. Totally late to the game. I just uploaded yesterday the my show on season 3, so please check it out. It's you know again very late to the game with this series, but better late than never. And I feel like this time of year is the best time to do it. So having a total blast, and I you know, just been sharing my thoughts about it, and as I go, for the obvious reasons. And so there's the third season is done. I've started the fourth season, and the video for the third season is up. So check it out, and yeah, comment. I love the comments. There's been a few over the last few weeks. I had a bunch of people comment, so that was really cool. I spent one day, which has never happened for me, and for what it's worth, but I spent like a couple hours responding to all the comments on one video. So very very cool. I love the interaction with other people who are real passionate about movies and television and all those kinds of things. So today's show is going to be a little bit of a different thing because I'm going to be doing another specialty show, a music related show. I've done some music shows before. I did a show on. I try to pick, if I'm going to do a music show, I usually try to pick a band or a group that has I have a long history with, or that has had just a huge influence on me personally and musically. Personally, it's on it's at a level of where it's just really inspiring. A lot of these groups that I've talked about have had just an amazing body have an amazing body of work, and it's like their work ethic that really inspires me, and their creativity. And then with the actual music side of it, as far as the sheer kind of inspiration, these groups that I've talked about all have a huge influence on my band Quantum. So I have done a show. I did a show on the Miles Davis Quintet. That was a lot of fun. That got a lot of traction. Tremendous group. My favorite jazz group of all time. That is a band I pretty much, in some form or another, listen to every day. I did a show on one of my all-time favorites, probably the most important electronic group of all time, and that is Suicide. They came out in the mid to late '70s. A duo, just tremendous talent, hugely influential on my band Quantum, and just a huge inspiration. I did a show on my favorite band of all time, and that is Alltecker, another British duo that has been just I can't really express how much I love their music and how much of an influence they have had on me, not only personally but definitely musically for what I do with my crazy weird band Quantum. Tremendous. So I love to try to talk about music, and try to put a spotlight on a band that has had a huge influence on me. And so and I'm always trying to mix things up. So today's show is on, I think, one of the most iconic electronic duos of all time, and that is the Chemical Brothers. I have a huge, long history with this band. Uh, yeah, ever since college, or maybe even before. I was in my probably mid 20s, late 20s, 30s, early 30s when I really got into the Chemical Brothers. They were at one point a total and absolute obsession for me. Um, I would buy every one of their albums with such like anticipation. I think they're also, I mean, for me too, musically, one of the most inspiring groups for my band Quantum. They are a huge, huge, tremendous influence. And again, I think the thing that I love about their music, the Chemical Brothers started in '89, which is, I mean, they are wicked old school by, well, at least by today's standards. Ed Simmons and Tom Rowlands, they started in Manchester in '89. They, with all of the crazy trends, especially with like electronic music, where it's kind of evolved, all the big changes from like all the house music the that was coming out in the '90s, the early 2000 ish period, and then where it evolved to where the dubstep thing came out, and then it evolved to where the EDM kind of thing came out. All the trap music, just all the permutations and trends, and they've been able to still do what they do, and they don't really. I don't know. I feel like their studio albums and especially their live performance, but especially their studio albums when it comes to their actual material and their tracks that they write, and produce, they they've always just kind of done what they have their own style, and they've never really gone with the status quo. Like they never decided to necessarily put out when these trends were huge, like an EDM album, or they never really decided or had the thing of where they started working with giant pop stars and crossed over into becoming total pop stars. They never put out like a full on like dub step album. They've kind of just done what they have done, and you know you have artists like David Guetta, who was a DJ in Europe for a very long time, and then he started doing these collaborations with a lot of pop singers, and then that kind of gave birth to the whole EDM. So now when you hear pop music, you hear a big electronic, sound. And on one hand, it's definitely like brought a lot of people to the table, new fans. For the most part, electronic music and especially the dance music aspect, dance culture, has always been kind of underground, huge, very huge movement. But it's always been on the it's never quite reached the stardom of like pop music. And I attribute that happening to David Guetta, who he was again a real popular electronic artist, DJ primarily in Europe, and then he eventually started working with big giant pop stars like Alicia Keys and Beyonce and you name it. And once that started happening, suddenly this music got labeled EDM, electronic dance music, which is kind of silly. But then it got into the homes of everyone. It became really pop oriented music. And on one hand, it was really good, and that happened probably about 10 years ago or so, where now, everybody and their grandmother was suddenly, aware of or was a fan of electronic music, especially dance music. And so, on one hand, it brought a lot of people to the table, and it, because of that cross pollination of going way into the pop world, it brought a lot of people on board who might not have ever checked out that scene, the electronic music scene. And so, on one hand, it made the scene, if you will, or if you want to call it the scene, huge, and it expanded. It expanded it by leaps and bounds. And on the negative side, I feel like, well, there's and again, this is just my opinion. I feel like there is whole generations now of people who don't know of anything or any other music beside that. Besides say that period of say within the last 10 years, they don't know the kind of the origins of where that music came from. And the music that tends to be a little bit grittier, a little bit darker, more underground stuff. That I think the real deal stuff. And so to a degree, I feel like the scene itself has gotten highly commercialized and extremely watered down. So it's got its pluses and its minuses when things like that happen, and we see that in culture all the time with trends and. But I feel like the Chemical Brothers have always maintained their identity, and they have always just kind of done what they've done, and just very inspiring and very very cool. Um, and they have been putting out albums for just you know decades, really. I mean, it's kind of insane how many albums they've put out. F- for that beautiful feeling, which is a new album, I guess apparently they have just put out, and well, it came out last year technically, 2023. So many albums. Yeah, this album just came out last year. For that beautiful thing. And again, they've been around for decades, and it's just wild how they have this crazy longevity with with all of these new trends that come and go at times of where it seems like it happens at the drop of a dime. And their sound, I guess the way you could kind of describe the Chemical Brothers sound is that they came out of the 80s, and so they had a big influence. I feel like they're like acid techno kind of. They had a punk rock. I feel punk rock music was a big influence. Their music a lot of the times gets labeled as like techno, and I think that they definitely have a huge influence of that kind of music. Psychedelia is also a big, huge influence on their music. Hip hop is also a big influence. Funk music. They put out a DJ set a few years ago where they do play some of their own tracks, but they also play other people's tracks, and it's an amazing. It's actually one of my favorite releases that they put out because not only you get to hear their music, but you hear it in the context of their influences, and it's a real. Not only is it just an amazing collection of music, but you really hear where their influences are. It's really cool, and I use a lot of classic soul and funk music and classic old school hip hop, and that's those sounds have always been a deep influence. They put out Push the Button in 2005, which is a really great album. Surrender 1999, which was a huge album for their career. Probably my favorite album of theirs is Dig Your Own Hole in 1997. That album is just a complete masterpiece. That album, that was my first Chemical Brothers album that I ever got, and I literally, for all intents and purposes, wore that album out. It's a very dark album. It's a very atmospheric album, but it's super funky, and it's one of those albums that you could throw in at a party, even though the music is kind of dark. It is the grooves on the album are just completely amazing, super funky. I think it's one of the funkiest albums I've ever heard, and one of the most creative albums ever done in general, but especially in the world of electronic music. And Dig Your Own Hole was my introduction to the Chemical Brothers, and it remains. There's a lot of great albums that they put out over the years, but that remains. Dig Your Own Hole remains probably the greatest for me. Another album that they did, which I got shortly after, is Exit Planet Dust, which is another masterpiece. Amazing. They started to kind of branch off and kind of change their sound a little bit with that album, where it definitely has. It's still like super, big beat driven, but very psychedelic. Very psychedelic. Furthermore, which came out in 2010. No Geography in 2019. Come With Us, which is actually a really great album also. I really, really got into that album big time. Um, I kind of became obsessed with that album along with Dig Your Own Hole and Exit Planet Dust. A really great album. And it's one of their, for all intents and purposes, a later album. They also put out We Are the Night in 2007. They did the soundtrack for a movie too. They also did the music for this movie Hannah that came out in 2011. Just tremendous, and they are incredibly active live. They are known for their incredible live shows. Their shows have a very psychedelic kind of element. They have I think the Chemical Brothers have found an interesting niche because I feel like there are a lot of I think a lot of kids or people who are quote unquote into kind of the hippie scene. Maybe people that are into the Grateful Dead and things like that. They've found it. I feel like they found a unique niche because I have found over the years that people who tend to be part of that kind of scene have gravitated and also are very into the scene of what the Chemical Brothers have started and what they do. But they are so highly prolific, and they're known for their live shows. They're still on the road constantly, playing all these giant festivals. It seems like their popularity has never really waned. They have these massive. Anytime you look up any of their shows or see any of the venues that they're playing at these like massive stadiums, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. Further, which was another album they put out in 2010. Um, let's see what else they put out here. I mean, just incredibly prolific. Live at the Social Volume One. Live at the Social is Volume One is the album I was talking about before, which is I actually picked it up last year, and that came out in 1996. It's wicked old school, but it is essentially a DJ mix of them playing live and with records. And again, it's like a music lesson, and it's you see where their influences are. There's all these great classic like James Brown tracks. There's all this great old school hip hop, super funky, and then it also they blend it with their own music, and it's an amazing release. I think it might be as far as their DJ mixes or groups that put out DJs mixes, it might be the best. I mean, it's really really incredible. I also quite a few years ago at Bull Moose, it was actually one of the first things I discovered when I first discovered Bull Moose. It was I used to go to. I have a good friend that now lives in New York, but he used to live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I used to go down there a lot to visit him. And he was the one who hit me to my friend Sean Russell, who was actually a guest on the show last year. He hit me to Bull Moose because Bull Moose, their main location at that time, was in Portsmouth. So he would take me there, and I became enamored with that shop. And then, well, it kind of changed my life because now that's my home away from home. And one of the first things I bought there was this really awesome Chemical Brothers collection, and it's called the Singles from '93 to 2003, and it's really really good. It's really really awesome. I don't have a ton of music DVDs or Blu-rays. I do have quite a few, but it's not something I have that I seek out for some odd reason. But I do have some that are really great. But this is awesome. This is a collection of all of their music videos, but it's got some killer live stuff. Really good live clips of them playing at some various festivals, and it's really, really good quality. You really get an essence of what the experience is like. There's also some really awesome interviews with the band in here. It's very, very cool. The other thing that is really cool about the Chemical Brothers, like I mentioned David Guetta, they were he kind of brought the music into the pop realm because of his collaborations with a lot of big pop stars. The Chemical Brothers also have, for years and years and years, um, been working with other stars. Um, they've worked with Noel Gallagher from Oasis, um, the Black Keys, Q-Tip, Beth Orton, who is an amazing singer, and also Kazu Makino. They have been doing all kinds of collaborations with singers for years. And now that's since David Guetta, that's become more of a trend. But they have always been tremendous workers in the studio, and they've always been collaborating with other people, and very very cool. Again, Chemical Brothers, I think they're if you're a fan of electronic music, I think they are definitely one of the essential groups, and I think they're one of the most important groups ever. For me, they are a huge influence on the wacky music that I try to create. So yeah, cheers to Chemical Brothers, and they're still going strong. I just saw today that they were playing next month in Europe at these two massive music festivals. So it's inspiring and amazing that they're still going and still kicking ass. So this is Jason Dean. Thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.